So you've seen videos on controlling the availability of legal substances like alcohol. We've talked about trying to limit the availability of prescription drugs in a variety of ways, but we can also control the supply of illegal drug, of illicit drugs. Now, illegal drugs follow the principle of supply and demand. When there's a large supply and there's low demand, there's low cost. When there's low supply and very high demand, there's very high cost. And what we do and what these control policies for illicit substances try to do is limit the supply, which keeps demand high, which keeps cost high. And when cost is high, fewer people can afford the drug, they use less of the drug, or they don't use the drug entirely. And then the consequences of that substance's use can decrease, theoretically. So, a direct ways to control the supply of these illicit substances is actually the prohibition of the substance itself. And this might be the most effective supply control policy we have. There's minimal enforcement involved. There is some enforcement we need, but knowing that a substance is illegal makes it very much more difficult to obtain. Basically, there is no corner liquor store I can go to get cocaine or heroin, making it extraordinarily more difficult to find than alcohol or tobacco. Now, there are some unintended consequences of prohibition, so it could increase violence rates and drug-related violence in certain localities, but on balance, prohibition still remains the most effective way to control the drug supply. As part of this prohibition, we can ban precursor chemicals. So, drugs that require some chemistry to create them, so methamphetamine, for instance, we can ban the precursor chemicals that are needed to produce the methamphetamine or limit their supply in the marketplace so that they're simply not available. Some other ways we can directly control the supply of illicit substances are through things like crop eradication. So we actually go to the source country that produces the drugs and we destroy the crops that produce the precursors to the final substance. So we destroy the poppy fields, which is on the left, before they can actually harvest the sap to actually produce the heroin. We also try to help people use alternative development. So we try to get farms, rather than farm and grow poppy seeds, we try them to develop things like cotton and other commodity products instead of these illicit substances. I believe this is the last direct controlled supply policy we'll talk about, is interdiction. And interdiction are those news stories where we say we have seized 100 pounds of heroin, we've seized 2 tons of cocaine, these massive seizures. And interdiction is the idea of preventing an illicit drug from being exported from the countries that produce the drug and preventing the illicit drug from being imported into the consumer countries. And while these may or may not be effective, they do produce those kind of nice news headlines about how much of the drug has been seized. There are indirect ways to control the illicit drug supply. The goals of these indirect programs are to increase the search time for someone to find the drug. So again, it's already difficult to find an illegal drug and to purchase it. We want to make it more difficult, and again, to increase the cost. These include things like retail enforcement. So arresting the drug traffickers, the distributors, the suppliers, make it harder for people to find their drug. Converting brazen drug markets. So if there's areas where drugs are simply sold out in the open without any recourse and without any penalty, we try to convert those types of drug markets into covert drug markets where they have to hide. And again, by hiding, it makes it harder for people to find the drug, it makes it more difficult, and ultimately it makes it more costly. We also change sentencing. Now, we can sentence people, we can give them fines, we can give them jail time depending on what the offense is. Possession typically doesn't have quite as strong a sentencing as distribution. We change the sentencing based on the substance. So distributing heroin has a greater jail sentence, has a longer jail sentence than marijuana. Crack cocaine has a longer jail sentence than cocaine. And then the sentencing, what happens to someone, the severity of that depends on the country. So right now, the Philippines is literally waging a war on drugs where they're killing people who are essentially known drug users, not just the distributors, but the drug users themselves. Distributors, and I believe in Singapore, carry the death penalty if you're caught distributing any type of illicit substance. Now, in the United States, we claim that there really are harsh jail sentences for some types of substance control, but we don't give people the death sentence for distributing or possessing an illicit substance like that occurs in other countries. Now, for new psychoactive substances, new ones are typically allowed until we realize people are using them for illegal purposes. They tend to be the fad drugs where you hear about them and then you don't hear it, and then they kind of fade away into the background. Countries like the United States say that these types of substances are allowed until they're explicitly banned. Other countries take the reverse approach, saying that all substances are banned unless they're initially exempted. And these are different in that they go through different distribution networks. These type of fad drugs are not going through the cocaine channels. They're not going through the heroin channels. They're going through a different way to a different distribution network, and they're reaching different types of populations. The common theme among all drug supply policies and programs, whether they're direct supply programs or indirect supply programs, are that they're very costly. They require a significant amount of resources outside of the simple prohibitions. Highly publicized events, so when we have those drug seizures, while it takes those drugs off the market, they don't really have a big effect on the marketplace overall. Remember that these illicit drug markets are highly decentralized, so even if we take apart one part of it, there's another part that will fill the void. There's actually really no evidence supporting the effectiveness of direct drug supply control policies. So whether that's interdiction or actually crop eradication, there's no evidence that that actually works. And really, when we do say that they are effective, it depends on how it's measured. Are we measuring how many acres of a crop has been eradicated, or are we measuring how many people are actually using the drug? So outcome successes, the actual use of the drug and the consequences of the drug, are much rarer than these process effects and these process evaluations, or the success on the process side. And when outcome evaluations do demonstrate positive results, it seems to require some unique set of circumstances that can't be replicated in any other situation. Now, the unintended consequences of these policies. These can include increases in crime, increases in violence, depletion of resources that could be better used elsewhere. And because of that, especially the last one, we do need to carefully think about what to do before actually implementing an illicit drug supply control policy.